FSD students, this is a review of some of the material we have talked about, specifically what was discussed today in class, which was Tuesday. We had talked about 30, 60, 90 triangles a little bit before. Just a quick review of this in a 30, 60, 90 triangle. The rule is if the short side, which is the side opposite 30, let's say, is 4, the hypotenuse is always double that, and the long leg would be 4 times the square root of 3. But realizing what we talk about in trigonometry, that we're always using the unit circle, which the hypotenuse would be 1, that means that the side opposite 30 would be 1/2, and the side opposite 60 would be 1/2 times the square root of 3, which is the same as root 3 over 2. Now, in a 45, 45, 90 triangle, which is an isosceles triangle, the rule is if the leg, let's say, is 5, that means they both need to be 5, it's isosceles, then the hypotenuse would be 5 times the root of 2. And if I knew the hypotenuse, let's say the hypotenuse was 8, then the leg would be 8 divided by the square root of 2. And we would need to rationalize that. So, dealing with the trigonometry in the unit circle, when our hypotenuse or our radius is always 1, that means the leg of a 45 would be 1 divided by root 2, which if I rationalize this, would be root 2 over 2. And that would be both of those legs. Now, we'll discuss some more 45, 45s before, but talking about the other trig functions, we had already defined that the cosine of theta is x over r, and that the sine is y over r. And everything is going to be dependent on those two. 4 new trig functions. The tangent is defined as y over x, which is also the sine of an angle divided by the cosine of the angle. And then we have our reciprocal functions. Secant is reciprocal of cosine. It's 1 over cosine, which would be 1 over the x, or you could think of that as r over x. The cosecant is the reciprocal of sine, which would be then 1 over y, or r over y. And cotangent is reciprocal of tangent, which would then be x over y, or could be defined as the cosine of the angle divided by the sine of the angle. So, we did some problems here where I'd have an angle measure, and this is an angle in the first quadrant that goes to the point 12, 5. And if I drop this down and form a right triangle, that means my x would be 12, my y would be 5. And if I use Pythagorean theorem to find my r, that's the square root of 144 plus 25. That's the square root of 169, which is 13. So I have a Pythagorean triple here. Now, cosine was defined as x over r, which in this case would be 12/13. The sine of the theta would be the y over r, which would be 5/13. The tangent would then be the y over the x, or the sine divided by the cosine, which would be 5/12. Then the other 3 trig functions would just be reciprocals of those. Secant's reciprocal of cosine, I just flip it. Cosecant is reciprocal of sine, I just flip that. and cotangent's reciprocal of tangent, so that would be flipped. We can do the exact values the same way. So if I've got a 180-degree angle, which would be rotated 180 degrees, and I'd be talking about this particular angle measure. So where this crosses the unit circle would be that point -1, 0. So then our cosine is the x. Cosine of 180 would be -1. The sine of 180 would be 0. Tangent of 180 would be y over x. 0 over -1. 0 divided by anything is 0. And then undefines, or reciprocal, sorry. Secant is reciprocal of cosine, and the reciprocal of -1 would be -1. Reciprocal of sine is cosecant. Reciprocal of 0, you can't divide by 0, that would be undefined. And tangent, its reciprocal is cotangent. Reciprocal of 0 is also undefined, or no real answer for those. 150-degree angle. So 150-degree angle would be in this position, where this angle would be 30 degrees, which makes this a half. And then the other side, opposite the 60, would be √3 over 2. And this would be negative because I'm going left. So now I'm not going to write 150 again, but the cosine of this angle, the cosine of 150 would be the x, -√3 over 2. The sine of that angle would be the y, which is 1/2. And the tangent would be the y over the x, which would be 1 over a -√3, which if I rationalize that would be a -√3 over 3. And then my reciprocal, secant, would be -2 over √3, which if I rationalize that would be -2 √3 over 3. Cosecant would be the reciprocal of a half, which is 2. And cotangent would be the reciprocal of tangent, which if I just flip this part, it would be just -√3. And you'll see those same familiar values in any angle that forms a 30, 60, 90 triangle. 315. 315 is going to be an angle in the fourth quadrant. And if I do that, I would form a 45, 45, 90 triangle. So if this is my unit circle, we have found that both of these legs would be √2 over 2, with this one being negative. So therefore, the cosine of 315 would be √2 over 2. The sine of 315 would be -√2 over 2. The tangent of 315 would be a -1, dividing the y by the x. And then our reciprocals, we'd flip them. And if I flip and then rationalize, I'd have 2 √2 over 2. The 2's cancel, and so that would just be √2. Reciprocal of sine is cosecant. We'd go through that whole process, and it would just end up being a -√2. Cotangent's reciprocal of tangent. Reciprocal of -1 is also just -1. So I hope this helps you today as you complete your packet and work on the formative assessment.